Bye Biden. Here are 10 things you need to know about Kamala Harris from an Eastern point of view. Plus, the untold story of Crowdstrike. They warned about a tech disruption from China and then caused one themselves. But first, a summary of world news as seen from this side of the world. President Joe Biden abandoned his bid for a second term after his shocked supporters discovered that he was old. They realised this after it was pointed out to them that their candidate repeatedly started sentences and then took a short power nap before waking up to try to complete them. Now, we're going to give you 10 things you need to know about his deputy, Kamala Harris, shortly. But first, the other news. US technology company Crowdstrike warned that the Chinese could bring the world to a standstill. This is the article on the front page of its website. And what happened?
A few moments later.
Well, the world was brought to a standstill by US technology company Crowdstrike. And that little lesson, boys and girls, can be applied to pretty much everything you read in the news about China. Investigators into the Trump assassination bid say they've been stymied because the hitman was shot dead before he could say a single word. Here's a picture of him. No, wait, that's the wrong picture. Anyway, the man who tried to assassinate America's once and future king was killed by Secret Service agents last week in Pennsylvania before he could talk to anyone. Nothing strange about that, as historian studying Lee Harvey Oswald will confirm. In UK news, Clark Kent has been elected Prime Minister of Britain. Yes, the bland, mild-mannered alter ego of Superman is now in 10 Downing Street. But there's one difference. The original Clark Kent fought the mega bullies trying to dominate the world. Britain's Clark Kent serves the mega bullies trying to dominate the world. The French, meanwhile, are recovering from a big surprise. Every news media report for many weeks said, oh no, the hard right people are going to come first in the election. What happened? The hard left people came first in the election. Mainstream media, read it and note that the opposite is usually true. And finally, a reader in China sent me this logo, the actual logo of the US NSA division tasked with destroying the whole world's right to privacy. The NSA spies on adversaries, allies and citizens alike. And as you can see, the logo is a picture of the planet trussed up with an American eagle in control. The truly astonishing thing is that the US makes no attempt to hide the stunningly anti-democratic nature of its stance vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And then it labels its global interference operations as spreading democracy. Now to the loudest story of the day. Biden has abandoned his bid for a second term as US president. What does this mean for the vast majority of humanity? The wider world that encompasses China, the rest of Asia, Africa, the 87% of humanity that isn't the West. Here are 10 things to note. Number one, first, Asians are initially downbeat. They want Trump to win. So the news that Biden will be replaced with someone who can actually walk and talk is seen negatively. But why do Asians like Trump? Well, in the US, both sides talk about starting a war in China. But Trump is unlikely to actually do it. He's non-interventionist and doesn't like sending out troops. While the Democrats are active warmongers to a shocking extent.
5 reasons why many Asians want Trump to win the US 2024 election. 1. Trump is seen as a businessman, and business folk know that businesses thrive when both customers and shopkeepers do well. Very different from Biden's West wins, East loses strategy. 2. Trump boasts of being the president that brings US troops home, in contrast to the accelerating militarization of Asia by the Biden team. 3. Trump has made a selling point of being the US president who hasn't started any wars, in contrast with the Biden administration, which continually acts the status quo that has kept East Asia peaceful. 4. Trump is a tough-talking, no-nonsense leader in the Asian style, more familiar than Biden, who talks human rights while dispatching bombs to be dropped on civilians in Yemen and Gaza. 5. Trump is pragmatic, tough-talking, and highly skeptical about Western media, just like the most successful Asian leaders. On the downside, Trump may bring about ecological disaster, in which case we all lose.
Here's Kamala sending billions of taxpayer dollars to Israel to use for defense, which we now know means killing families in Gaza.
Our defense relationship is critical to both nations, which is why I support the United States' commitment to provide Israel with $38 billion in military assistance over the next decade.
And here's Robert Kennedy explaining that situation.
Kamala Harris is a warhawk on Ukraine. She's a warhawk on China. I think that we should be figuring out ways to coexist with the rest of the world as best we can. I think she's a product of the corporate control of our democracy.
Number 2, will the fact that Kamala is part Asian be a good thing? No. She rigidly follows US foreign policy, which is to be pro-Israel, anti-China, and demanding that the US, which is just 4% of humanity, is a superior civilization, which gives it the right to be unelected leader of the world. Now, we all know about the complex, deadly tension between Western Ukraine and the Russian-speaking Eastern Ukraine. But here's how Kamala Harris summed up what happened next.
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
Philosophers say to simplify is to mislead. That's a good example there. Number 3, the rise of Harris is being presented as virtually inevitable this morning. But that's not the case. She's not widely popular in her own party. Why? Because she rose to power in California, which is a Chinese-style autonomous region, like Xinjiang or Hong Kong or Taiwan. California is very much an independent one-party state in the style of, Singapore or China. So what happened was that she had a fairly smooth political ride to the top, going from public prosecutor to being a senator for California in 2017. But once she became vice president, her odd speech habits and total lack of charisma became a problem.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
In fact, these days, her biggest critics are the people who know her best, the Californians. Number 4, but can she win for the Democrats? Yeah. Trump made a huge mistake last week. He should logically have picked Nikki Haley, a female person of colour, as a running mate. She would have given the necessary breadth to his ticket. But instead he picked a right-wing male, sort of narrowing his ticket. Number 5, her detractors within the party implied that she was basically a diversity hire who turned out to be a political lightweight. Others complained that such an attitude is insulting, but they at the same time urged her to take a white male running mate to balance the ticket. Users of X.com summed up their current search for a deputy by noting that it echoed a wine list. Would you like rich whites, for example? Number 6, Harris doesn't blank out like Biden does, but her speech-making abilities are much mocked. She's used the same slogan in several hundred speeches, calling on people to imagine what can be, unburdened by what has been.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be, unburdened by what has been.
What can be, unburdened by what has been.
What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be.
Well, now we'll find out whether she gets the world's top job or finds herself unburdened by what has been. Number 7, the Democrats need to beware the curse of the heir apparent. When people assume that it's obvious who will next take leadership, the result ultimately is disappointment. That's what happened with Al Gore in the year 2000 and Hillary Clinton in 2016. Number 8, Kamala's path to leadership will not be smooth. She has to win a majority of the 4,000 or so votes at the Democratic Convention next month. And if she fails, the so-called super delegates intervene. It's a group of about 700 senior members. They add their votes and then a decision is made. Number 9, what if someone else stands up for the same job? Well, from an Asian point of view, Gavin Newsom is seen as the most attractive because he made a recent visit to China during which he was very positive and cooperative. But he said he will not stand this time. Many people also say California is not well managed. Here's Oakland, where Kamala Harris was born. It's a place with many problems. Californians in general have a tough time in the US. California is not the US. It really does feel like a different country. It's far more different than, say, Hong Kong is to the rest of China.
50% of the homeless people in our country are in California, and she was behind those policies.
Number 10, are there any other choices? There are lots of jokes going around, such as this one, in which a mystery candidate called Kamala Harris stands to be president. But, they're all pro-war. There are would-be candidates which are pro-peace, such as Cornel West, Robert Kennedy. But the Democratic Party won't listen to them. They will only allow candidates who toe the line. You must be a friend to weapons makers, a friend to Zionists to get leadership. Here's Tulsi Gabbard speaking early this morning.
I'm going to sound the same warning now that I have been for years, going all the way back to 2020 when both Kamala and I were running for president on the Democratic ticket. She is unfit and unqualified to be our president and commander-in-chief and would be incredibly dangerous in that position. The prospect of Kamala Harris making decisions about war and peace and where to send my brothers and sisters in uniform into harm's way is not only terrifying to us, it should be terrifying to every American, knowing that we would all pay the price for her dangerous actions and dangerous decisions. Everything you've heard me say about Hillary Clinton, the queen of warmongers, can also be said of Kamala Harris. There should be no question in your mind that if Kamala is allowed to be our president and commander-in-chief, she'll be the maidservant of this queen of warmongers, the head of this elitist cabal of warmongers that has gotten us into this place. They're the ones who've been calling the shots behind Joe Biden's presidency. They would continue to call the shots if Kamala Harris is president. And where have they led us? To the brink of war with multiple countries in all parts of the world, and closer to the brink of nuclear war and Armageddon now than ever before.
When the provision of leadership to a man like Trump is actually our one chance of staying out of war, then it's clear the world has gone completely mad. Have a nice day.